Hey guys, hope you're all doing well today. I'm on here right now doing something different for the intro because I want to make an apology. This episode was recorded as we did the switch from the studio to the Zoom calls, and the audio's a little meh. Not on my guest side, it's actually on my side and my voice. So you can hear my guest perfectly clear. But I was messing around that day with like streaming video games and stuff like that, and I accidentally had the audio being picked up from my webcam, which it wasn't the best quality, but you'll still be able to hear everything in this interview. I just want to apologize that. And it's a great interview coming your way. Today, our guest is Robert Pasbani. He is a rock and heavy metal journalist from New York City and also the founder of metalinjection.net and the Metal Injection Livecast, which was a big inspiration for me to do my thing as well. And you're going to hear all about that. And beyond the rock and heavy metal themes throughout this interview is a lot more than that. Rob's whole journey is just about turning something you really love and are passionate about into a career. And I believe absolutely everybody can get some inspiration out of this one. So that's all I got to say for an intro. Thanks for tuning in. And from now on, there's going to be no audio issues. All right. I want to say, I feel like you and like the Metal Injection platform kind of inspired what I'm doing here. And it's cool to finally have you on here. It's a long time coming. I think I mentioned I was trying to do all of these in person, just the way of the world flowing, and have to change and adapt and everything. And I've seen you've been doing that too. So like, how have you been doing throughout this whole COVID experience?
Yeah, I mean it's a pleasure to be on, and I'm honored to have in any way inspired you to be more creative. That's awesome. For me, really, it hasn't changed too much. I work from home, so like my day to day is basically the same. The only difference is like I have nowhere to go at night.
Yeah,
uh, I just like I before the pandemic, I was kind of like over shows, and I was just like, I would joke with friends that I've retired from going to shows. Like I would only go if it was a band that I'd never really seen before, or if it's just like with Sugar or something. But if it's a band that I've seen a million times, even if I like them, I was just like, I could skip it. But now I'm like fiending. I really, really just want to go.
yeah, definitely. 'Cause it's like such a when you think about it, it's such a big part of your life too. Like you connected your work with that and everything, and just even the whole story of the metal injection platform. So, just your
Yeah,
thought.
I mean, it's really we've taken a hit because of it. Like our main source of revenue is advertising, of course. Like in addition to Metal Injection, I run an ad network, Blast Beat Network, and we essentially lost all of our advertising overnight because our main advertisers are essentially like Live Nation and AEG, and all the shows got canceled, so they don't need to advertise them. So uh, yeah, like it's been a bit of an adjustment, but you know, I have some savings. We're fine.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear too. And like, you don't have to move to Florida to keep things rocking or anything. But
Well, I would never move to Florida.
it's fired at Florida. But yeah, I kind of want to go back in time with you a bit. I
Sure.
remember discovering metal injection in 2004, pre YouTube, and I remember just coming like I ended up just watching one segment of Headbangers Ball that changed my life for I don't know the better or the worse, but it was just like this metalcore block, and I never heard metalcore before. It was like Kill Switch Chimera. I was like, what is this music? I need more. So I was searching the internet, and I came across Metal Injection, and I noticed you guys were like posting all these episodes pre-YouTube. Had to download the file. I was like watching them on like Real Player or some shit like that. And yeah, I remember them like or hearing your story too, even like
you guys been doing this prior to that on cable access. Am I correct?
Uh, it was both at the same time. So we actually started. We launched the site January 1st, 2004, and so you got in pretty early. You were in from almost the start. And we the concept we kind of came up with the idea in, I want to say, like, looking back at, funny enough, like some old live journal entries I have. The concept we came up with in like May of 2003, and by came up with I mean we were just stoned in a basement watching public access, and we were watching Brooklyn Public Access, and there was a metal show that came on, and it came on every week, and we would watch it and just like kind of shit on it. Like, looking back, it's like we were a little unfair to it, but you know, we weren't thinking that at the time. But we were just like, oh, we could do this so much better. And then it was just like, why don't we do this? Why don't we start it up? And so our thought was initially, yeah, to start a public access show. Like, we were thinking very small, very local, and it took basically 6 months to get approved. For some reason, we weren't approved. Like, it's like a quarterly approval thing, and we weren't approved for the first. I forget what it was, but we didn't get approved until January. And so then we were like, all right, well, now we have like a deadline to launch the site. The idea was to have like the site and the show, and then have like a radio show, because at the time I was still in college doing radio, and kind of do like all forms of media for Metal Injection, which, you know, even thinking now is just like, what the hell were we like? That's such a, like, scale it down a little, bro. And yeah, so we launched as a public access show, and then funny story is they sent us this big acceptance letter that we would be on Saturdays at 3 p.m. And so we kind of all got together, and 3 p.m. came, and we turned on the channel, and it wasn't our show. And we were so pissed because it was actually 3 a.m. that that we got. And funny enough, we were hanging out together the night before at 3 a.m. I remember, and we could have watched it, but we just didn't know. But anyway, so like the public access audience obviously is very limited, and I remember the public access channel had like a live stream you could link to, and we crashed their live stream. And then we were just like, well, why? Like, we were getting way more attention on the website, obviously, since it's global. And I actually remember a big critique about the first episode was that people thought it would be more professional based on like the marketing, which I kind of took as a compliment, because we had no money. So like,
Yeah.
to make people assume that it would be a much bigger deal than it was like cool. But yeah, so then long story short, you know, we started just posting the episodes online, and like you mentioned, it was before YouTube, so there was like no way to stream video other than Real Player. And like, it was just brutal. They were like 200, like, where are you hosting a 200 megabyte file in 2004? Like, this is before Dropbox or Google Drive, or like back when, you know, hard drives were only like 50 gigabytes or something like that. You know, like, it was, I don't remember exactly, but and eventually, you know, like, so we eventually kind of kept adjusting the business plan, for lack of a better word, in that we never really had a plan. We were just kind of going with it and hoping something would happen. And then eventually kind of morphed into like, we realized that like the half-hour format was pointless, because it was just kind of delaying things for us. It was taking too long to finish full episodes. And, you know, this was now a little post, like a year or two after, when YouTube came along and video on demand is a little more of a thing. So we started doing like clips more, and transitioning more into like kind of a blog. And this was even before blogging was a term. So yeah, 16 years has been quite a while.
A lot of things, like, and I'm going to get to them too, but it seems like you kind of like a little ahead of the curve of a little everything in the heavy metal media with what you do. And even like, it's cool to hear about like the whole thing of pitching to like a public access now, because like now I get like some messages from some people asking like, how do you start a podcast and blah blah blah, and I'll give them little steps here and there, and then it turns into them being like, oh, that's so much work. But when you think, when you wanted to make content like 20 years ago, and like what you guys did, it's like quadruple the amount of work you have to put in to make your make your thing come to life. And yeah, I commend
Yeah,
you guys
absolutely.
on your passion for that.
Yeah, even like with our podcast, we kind of started it right as like podcasting kind of began. So, yeah, there was no tutorials or podcasting services or how you get seated on like Spotify. It's like so much easier now. Like I sometimes wish I was 10 years younger because all the things that I was doing, it's so much easier to do now. Like even when I was going to school, I wanted to major in web design, and there was no such major. There was either computer science or art, but like you have to know how to paint and like do physical art, and I'm not good at that. So it was kind of like, oh, I don't like. We had to carve our own way, sort of, and now it's like there's like you said, it's so much easier now to do it. And really, the reason why we made it, you kind of touched on it, is because we put in the effort. Like no matter how shitty it was, or or like how tough it was, we weren't like thinking, what am I going to get out of this? It was just like, no, I want to do this, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to finish it no matter what it takes. And I think that's kind of what differentiated us from like some other people that tried to start up.
Yeah, yeah. I think one thing too that attracted me to it, I mentioned the metalcore days where I just wanted more and more of that, and I ended up finding Metal Injection. And after I downloaded one of your episodes, I remember just the vibe of it and how fun the episode was. It seemed like just a bunch of friends having fun doing like Saturday Night Live, like Mad TV style skits. And especially like where I grew up, there wasn't a lot of people listening to heavy metal, and there was a couple dudes, but they kind of took it too seriously, like in a way where you guys like kind of just made it not make a total mockery of everything, but you guys had fun with it, and like you were like willing to like joke about it too. And it was fun for me as a viewer to watch that, because you're hitting all these points of like this niche humor that was only like funny to me and everything. But yeah, it was so cool like to see how that was just presented that way too. And like, going into
Thanks. Yeah.
where you guys like kind of thinking like we kind of want to do like skits as well, like, and also promote bands and music videos and stuff. It's quite a unique experience back in the day.
Yeah, my experience kind of was similar to yours in that, like, the scene was blowing up and we were getting into all these cool bands and we wanted to talk about them, and there really wasn't an outlet. I think we even launched like maybe right before Headbangers Ball, or maybe we had the idea and then Headbangers Ball came, and then like we were like, shit. But there really was like, even that was like an hour Saturdays at 10 p.m. and it was very limiting what they played, and we were much more freeform with it. And another funny thing is, like, back then the challenge was even getting music videos, because like, again, there was no YouTube, there was no online like destination to rip videos from, so we'd have to cold email record labels, and most of them were like, who the fuck are you, like, you have to show me something. And so that was kind of a process too, and it was like growing. And to answer your question about the sketches, it happened very organically. Initially, the idea was just to do a straight up kind of Headbangers Ball ripoff. But also it wasn't just going to be like Headbangers Ball. Like, we wanted music videos and then like live footage, and then go to shows, and we would have our own live footage and classic videos. Like Frank had my partner had a huge collection of VHS tapes that he was collecting, like, because he was a huge metal fan, way bigger than I was at the time. So he had this huge backlog that we kind of sourced for our early episodes when we didn't have the music videos, and then we would be getting compilation. And it's so funny to think, like, we would get VHS tapes with like a label would send like a sampler, but like a music video thing, and it's a VHS tape. So then we would have to sit there and like rip the video off the VHS tape, which meant like putting it in, pressing play, and then recording and watching it through in real time. It was so archaic. And then I guess, like, so the first few episodes are like really embarrassing, but then we started kind of inviting more friends over. Like we would all just hang out anyway all the time, and we would just come up with a silly idea and then just shoot it. And like how you said, it just looked like a bunch of people hanging out having a good time. That's really all it was. We took it like we did not take it seriously. Like we tried to, but it was just a hang, and we just happened to do bits, and then we kind of like got more and more into it, and like when the response was getting good, like we were getting more creative with ideas. And then I feel like after a year or so, it kind of became like we ran out. No, I don't want to say we ran out. It was like, okay, what do we do now? Like we've already like done all the jokes, so it was a little harder to come up with concepts. So that also kind of helped uh, like switch over to the on-demand format.
Yeah, that's cool to hear. Yeah, it was like such a spectacle of just everything, and yeah, man, and going like fast forwarding a little bit too, you guys kind of took the route away from doing those half-hour blocks of episodes, kind of made like individual like music videos and etc. like that. And I would follow. I would be on the forums. I had all you guys on MySpace, and yeah, I just loved the content. And I think what was really awesome was you mentioned it too. It was kind of predating podcasts being popular, and you guys did the Metal Injection livecast, which is still going till this day. And I want to say, as like somebody who's been watching this for like almost 20 years now, like the Metal Injection platform, it's
Yeah.
really charming to see that still that core group of friends get together once a week and still do your thing, and like with the layers of inside jokes and like just it's so cool. Like so even I remember that first episode of the live cast, and you guys turned it on, and I was like listening to it live, and for the first like 20 minutes or so, you guys didn't know it was working, and you guys were just like talking about, is this on, is this on, and it was just such hilarious like banter too. And like yeah, what is your like intake of like starting the live cast?
Yeah. So yeah, like we've actually been doing the podcast now for 11 or 12 years, and it's pretty brutal right now. There's a thunderstorm happening, so it's
Oh
like
yeah.
it's really adding to the effect. But yeah, we kind of started right as podcasts were happening, and I'm honestly surprised we still do it too. Just in the sense of like, I can't believe like before the quarantine even, we get together once a week, every week. It's like the after Metal Injection, the biggest commitment I've ever had.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but really, it started in college. It predates even Metal Injection. The idea for Metal Injection, just because I met, well, I've known Noah since high school, but I met Sid and Darren in college, and through the college radio station that we did, and we would do a show Friday nights, and we had so much fun doing it. But then the reason it was fun though was because the radio station, like the college that we went to, they didn't give a shit about the radio station, so it was kind of like they let us just do whatever the fuck we want, and it was
Nice.
great. But then they got this huge investment, and they actually built a new station that was actually like the station that when we were there was like in this closet all the way on the other end of the campus compared to like the TV and radio department. So like it was so hard to get, like no one ever bothered even showing up. Like our supervisor would come maybe once a month. But then like they got a big investment, and they like built a really nice radio station in the department, and so there was way more restrictions, and then we just stopped doing it. But then we were like, this was so fun. Like we genuinely have such a great time. Like I obviously we wouldn't be doing it still if we weren't. So we just came up with doing the podcast to kind of continue that, and it morphed into its own thing.
Yeah, yeah. Even just like predating the curve of like all the wave of so many, like everybody has a podcast now. I think it's cool. Like even like you guys called it the live cast. Was like podcasting even a term yet? Because I remember a couple shows like even like around that time there was you guys, and I would tune into Rogan, but he was just like answering questions on his webcam. It was very early, and he didn't call it a podcast either. And
No, yeah, the term
something.
podcast definitely existed. Because we also did a few other podcasts. I did a podcast I remember called Brain Damage. Noah did a power metal show called Power Hour. So it was like literally just starting. Like I remember maybe like Apple just announced that iPods can have podcasts now or something. And this was even predating iPhone. But yeah, so it started, and then the reason we wanted to do the live cast is because when we would do our college radio show, the reason we wanted it live specifically is because, yeah, like when we did the college radio show, we would take callers, and the callers were like the best part. Like they totally made the show. So we really wanted something with callers, and that's why we figured doing it live would make the most sense. And we did it like Friday nights. And we did it Friday nights just because we all worked at the time, and it was just like, well, here's an excuse to kind of get together. But then like it was just like, oh, no guest will want to like call us on a Friday. Like they're all doing shit,
Yeah,
so we had to like switch it up. But yeah, no, podcasting. It was very, very in its very early form. No, like explaining to people what it was, kind of like took a few sentences extra. But then now it's kind of blown up. Yeah, we're totally like lost in the shuffle now. But it's still crazy. Like we still get fans that are like, I just learned about your podcast 3 months ago, and I've gone back now, and I'm listening to all the episodes, which is insane to me because it's like we're up to episode 575 or something like that. So that's like, and you know, they're like some of the shows are 2 hours, some of them are 3 hours. So that's like a lot of time listening to us, and especially some of that old stuff. It's like, you know, it's 10 or 11 years ago, and like listening back now, I'm a little embarrassed of
oh yeah,
some
yeah.
of the stuff I found funny.
I know I used to call in a bunch too, and I'm like, I don't want to listen to what I was doing then either. But what's interesting too, it's like even beyond yourselves, you guys created like this community, and in a way too, like I still keep in touch with some of the callers from like 11 years ago. We all got each other on like Facebook and shit like that, and even just like the other week, it was like my birthday, and I swear like 4 of them from who I met through calling in the Metal Injection livecast wish me like a happy birthday and stuff. So it's crazy how like and beautiful how you guys created like this platform, and it kind of expanded beyond yourself and like kind of made like this community.
Yeah, that's always my favorite thing too. We also have a Discord now. We have just like an ongoing chat going throughout the week, and it's really fun to even just see like on Facebook. I'm friends with the fans of the show, and just seeing them interact with each other, like coming up on my feed, like independent of the show, you know. And yeah, like I've done. We have a lot of callers, sorry, a lot of listeners in LA, and when I would be down there, I would do meetups, and it's just like, you people each drove like an hour each way just to hang out for, you know, like whatever. So it's so cool, and yeah, it's awesome, and like I'm very thankful for it. I feel very lucky to be able to do it and to have people care.
Just like it's one thing I think is cool about your story, Rob, too, is like overall just following your passion and like making this thing, and it continues to snowball and snowball and snowball. It's I guess it's led you to like so many different adventures in the industry of music, and being able to connect with like somebody like your heroes, and like because you yourself, like I want to say to people listening, you've interviewed everybody. Like, oh man, like some of the biggest names in rock and metal and pro wrestling, and yeah, what are your thoughts on like just like kind of the overall like journey of like an evolution of what you've done?
Yeah, it's like pretty wild to think about. I just sometimes I still can't believe that like I'm still doing this, or that I'm doing it at all. We've been doing it full time, maybe 10, 11 years now. And the first 2 years, it was like, oh, I don't know how long we'll be able to do this. I can't pay for anything. I was so broke, but now we're, you know, like my bills are paid. I live, I'm not like rich, but I'm living comfortably off of my own work. So I'm very grateful for that. And I'm constantly like, even in my most jaded days, thankful for that. And as for the like meeting my heroes, that's the biggest perk. That's the most surreal part of the whole thing, and like, you know, they're the longer I do it, the less I have like these sort of like starstruck moments. But like,
Yeah.
but even still, like sometimes it happens, and it's like I just can't sleep the whole night because I'm like, I can't believe we hung out and I fucking talked to James Hetfield and I interviewed him, and you know, like, like, or any wrestlers, or just like being backstage, and like there was a moment where I ended up in like Slayer's dressing room doing shots with Kerry King and his wife, and like the whole time I'm just like, don't say anything because you're gonna say something stupid that's not funny, and it's gonna fuck everything up. And but it was like so cool just hanging out with all of them, and then like I just had to. I was like, all right, I am like nobody's talking to me. I'm like flipping out right now. I need to find a way to excuse myself to thank everyone for politely like letting me be here, but I don't need to be here. I need to go. And so this was at an award show, and Guns N' Roses were about to play. And so I was just like, oh, I really want to go watch Guns N' Roses. So thanks for, and they were like, oh, of course, we understand. Go ahead. Like it wasn't rude. And then I walk out of their dressing room, and like, you know, to the right is where I came from, but then to the left, it's the stage, and Guns N' Roses is right there, and I'm like, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go watch them from the stage, and if someone tells me something, I'll leave. And then I watched Guns N' Roses.
Stay there too and just watch.
Yeah, they let nobody said shit. I mean, again, I'm not like in the way. I stood out of the way, but like it was amazing, and there was the added benefit that there were. I remember like a big thing was my battery was dead, but I had my charger on me, so I also was like charging my phone while watching Guns N' Roses from the side of the stage. It was just like, what the fuck is like, what am I doing here? Who am I? You know.
It's amazing. It's kind of like look back at your life of being like a fan of the music, and then all of a sudden you're years with everybody in a way. But you really put in the work in, and it's all deserved and everything. And I feel like I'm having little moments like that too, where it's like it's funny to kind of hear your internal narrative of being in a room with like Slayer. And I've had like some recent moments like that too, where it's just like you're overthinking the situation. It's like, okay, Sean, play cool, don't say anything stupid, and just like be like, I don't know. It's interesting what can happen when you kind of unapologetically like embrace your passions and turn them into something else, like just kind of follow your dreams. And I don't know, it's cool to hear your story, because everybody who I interview on this show who've kind of grown in whatever they do, from stand-up comedy to music to pro wrestling or whatever, it's they all have like in a way just this similar attitude of just giving her and like kind of being like I mentioned, like unapologetic with following your dreams. Have you ever had like any moments in the early years where you kind of doubted yourself, like going
Yeah.
forward?
Oh, I mean, still, still now. But to your point, I do want to say that, like, you know, the reason I kept doing it, like, I took all the things I was good at, which was like building websites, all this stuff, and I applied it to something that I really, really enjoyed, which is heavy metal. And so I think that, like, because I was working on stuff that I was truly passionate about, it motivated me to keep going, even though there was like zero monetary gain. There was loss. Like I had to pay to do it for the first 6 years. So like that's kind of what I would say to people who want to do, like, you know, like I always get people come up to me as well, like you mentioned, just like, oh, what kind of advice, like, how do you do it? What's your secret? And like, you know, like I try to tell them, like, no, what's your secret? And like the secret is you just have to do it. You just have to do it and reiterate, like keep doing it, keep working at it, and like figure out what works. And also I think a big part of it is being able to adjust on the fly. Like metal injection right now is a completely different thing than it was 16 years ago, and it's a completely different thing than it was, it's a slightly different thing than it was 5 years ago even. Because we're constantly, like, the internet is changing, like what can be profitable is changing, like, so we've adjusted with the times. Like there was a period where we were hosting our own videos, and we were like, we're gonna be the metal YouTube. And then it was just like we can't afford to be the metal YouTube.
Yeah.
The server cost for hosting video is insane, and we don't, like, to give you a specific example, we don't have the sales staff to then go and sell like the video ads that would pay for all the video hosting. So like it was like at that moment that I'm like, all right, Metal Injection is a company that's two full-time people, me and Frank, and then like we have freelancers. But it's like, what can we do within our resources, and then like kind of work with that. Like don't you could set goals very high, but you gotta like there has to be some like realism and like, okay, I'm not getting there. Maybe I need to readjust and like have a new goal, and there's nothing wrong with that to do that. And I'm sorry, what was the question though?
But you're dropping some gems right now, and yeah, it's true. It's so important to just like go with the flow, because I think like sometimes when I don't know, you start these things, you have like an envision of how it's gonna go, and this is my plan, and like that's when you get humbled like hard sometimes, and
Yeah, I don't know what the fuck I was doing 16. Like, I don't know what the business was. Like, our goal was like, we're gonna get Metal Injection on TV, and we're gonna get a show on the radio, and the website will like be ads for it. But it's like, what TV station is gonna pick up a metal show? Like, and why would they pick us? Like, why would they go with us and not like Jamie Josta? And so like reality comes crashing down on your naivete, and that's kind of when you have to be like, well, what is realistic? What can you do? And another thing I learned that I like, it took me a while to learn, and I think it's very important, is that like there would be a lot of like jealousy about like other people's success, and like, oh, why are they getting this opportunity and I'm not getting this opportunity, and I it took me a while, but I realized like that's the absolute wrong way to look at it, because like you can only control what you do, like how much work you put in. You can't control how much work your competitor puts in, or what kind of like access they have, or what privilege they have that you don't have, that makes like giving them the opportunities that you're jealous of. So the only person you could really compete with is yourself. Like the only way, like I stopped judging my success a long time ago based on how others are succeeding, and I instead judged it based on like how successful I am. Like, am I more successful than I was last year? Am I more successful than I was 5 years ago? Am I more successful than I was last month? Has there been growth? And you really can only compete with yourself. That's the only. And otherwise, you're going to go crazy.
The best way to evolve yourself. It's really well said, Rob. And yeah, like, and that's like beyond just media. That's in life in general.
Yeah, with any project that you do, you can't look at others and start getting like cynical and jealous, and like being like, even with a band, like, oh, why is this band in our scene getting this record label deal or whatever? Like, they sound so shitty. Like, I've practiced so much more, I put in so much. It's like, it doesn't matter. They're getting the deal because they're drawing 200 people. Why? Like, instead of being mad at them, figure out how you could draw 200 people so that people care about your band. Like, that's, I have no time. Like, I used to sulk like that so much, but it's like, it's a total waste of time. It does. I mean, it can be cathartic for a minute, but ultimately you have to realize, like, look, this is what I have. How can I improve it? How can I work to making it bigger?
I even think that energy too comes off as like very unattractive for people too. If somebody's just always like sulking or whatever, like if you want to get new followers, fans, or whatever, just, I don't know, you just gotta like kind of carve your own path, do something unique, and like your story.
Yeah. And nobody owes you anything. Your friends don't owe you listening to your band or going to your show. You have to earn that. You have to convince them that it's worth it.
Yeah. Did you find like I don't know, I'm kind of getting this with the podcast, that strangers are way more supportive than people like I've grown up with, which I'm okay with, where it's just like, I don't know what it is, just because maybe people remember the old college version of me when I was like an idiot or whatever, and I evolved so much, and these people are kind of seeing the evolution of what I don't know, my work is later on, and they're like more gung ho about it than people like, I don't know, from my past. I don't know if you've experienced that in like your metal injection.
I like for me, I didn't care what my friends
Yeah,
think. Kind of like it's not. I realize like if they like it, great. If they don't, that's fine too. Like they're not going to make me successful. Like my friends, like I ultimately have to build an audience of people that do want to hear what I'm saying, and then that's more authentic as opposed to like people that owe it to you
yeah,
to listen or
sure.
whatever.
Yeah, and like you said, nobody owes you anything at the end of the day, too. It's just important to keep doing your thing if you believe in it and pushing forward. And yeah, it's cool to see. Again, I keep saying it's cool to see your journey, and not only you, like even the other members of Metal Injection too. Like the few months ago, like before the whole COVID thing, I remember just like scrolling on Facebook on the not Comedy Network. Yeah, the Comedy Network's the American one, right? Or no, Comedy Central. Okay, I'm getting the stations mixed up.
Yeah,
In
I mean,
Canada, it's Comedy Network. In America, it's Comedy Central. I was just scrolling by, and they showed a clip of Nikki Glazer's show, and all of a sudden I see Noah in the background, and then she pipes in, and then her name like popped up, and it's cool to see like her like from like the early Metal Injection days. Now she's just been killing it on Sirius XM. You even were on Sirius for a while too, right?
yeah. It was a really fun opportunity to DJ. That was another dream I had, and it was so surreal. And it felt so validating. It felt like like metal injection was my own thing, and like I made that happen. But like for an established entity to like welcome you in, it really felt like legitimizing. And I especially noticed it in terms of like how much more attention I would get. Like not to say that it was like more or less. It's just like a reaffirmation. Like, oh hey, I just heard you on the radio. Like that kind of thing. Like no, like because Sirius is such a huge fucking monolith entity that it's everywhere. It's like it's in people's cars. Whereas like with metal injection, you have to go and visit the website to access the content. Whereas like Sirius comes to you. So that was really really cool, and that was another one of those moments like we're talking about, like where you like kind of your internal monologue is like flipping out, and because being in that building is so crazy because you never know who the fuck is walking around. Like I came in one day for like an early meeting, because my shift was at night, which I loved. It was like my end of the day ritual. Is like I finish my metal injection work, go into the city, and record my show. Um, but like sometimes I'd go in the middle of the day and be like, I'd have a meeting. And then, oh, by the way, Slash is here. Do you want to go say hi to Slash? Like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. Or like Jason Newsted. I met so many people there that it's just like, what the fuck, or like even celebrity, I was again in Jose Mangan, who obviously is still there, who was my boss at the time. I was just in his office, and like out of nowhere, Justin Bieber just stops by. I was like, "Hey guys, nice to meet you. Thanks for everything." I'm like,
It's like, where am I right now? It's like a
"What?"
crazy dream.
I think that was even like my first day at Sirius, so it's just like, "What the." So it was really fun. Like Noah obviously is gone. Like she works there full time, and she's worked there for a while. And for me, it was just like a freelance DJ gig that lasted for a bit. But then I moved on. It was just like they just kind of, it was like more, I think like a budget thing. I don't even remember. But it was for like, it was like, I did it. It's great. Like by the end, it kind of became, I hate to say it, like a little tedious, like in the sense of like I got everything that I wanted from it, and it was just like another job. Like I don't want to make it seem like I hate, like I loved it,
Yeah, yeah.
but it was just like, like after finishing a full day of work to then have to go and like leave my house and like go into the city and like do another job. It just kind of, I kind of was just like, again, dreading it is too extreme, but it was just kind of like, I think this is the point. Like it reached the point where like, all right, we could move on. Like we could all part ways and it'll be fine.
Were you feeling like I'm just ODing on too much metal now? It's like I work a metal job all day,
Yeah,
and later on,
yeah. And it was just like I have no personal time, kind of. Again, like I could have, I make my own schedule, so I could have made personal time, but it was just like the way my day was structured. It would just be like a full day's worth of work for metal injection, and then a few extra hours. So like a 8-hour day becomes like a 12-hour day, or a 9-10 hour day.
Yeah, yeah. One thing I want to mention too is the squared circle thing, the kind of
Yes.
your project. Did that kind of come together because maybe you were getting a little burnt out of like the same thing? And
Yeah.
and, like, wanted to do this? But yeah, just to explain to people, it's like you're basically interviewing wrestlers, but also tying in your music knowledge and just kind of connecting to like the music they listen to and everything. And you've been like talking to everybody now. It's been amazing, and like how that's grown. And, yeah, how's that experience for you?
Yeah, it was kind of. I created that podcast about 3 or 4 years ago, and it honestly it was like like the real reason I created it was that I saw that, like, the way the idea came in my head was that I saw Scott Kelly from Neurosis followed the Young Bucks, and I was like, whoa. Like, and this is before
Your world's
Young
colliding
Bucks.
all of a sudden.
Yeah, like this is before AEW. This is when Young Bucks, like, you really had to be into wrestling, like really into it to know who they were. And I was like, whoa, Scott Kelly's like a legit wrestler. Like, he's not just like a WWE fan. Like how metalheads are like, oh, I like Metallica. That's not, you're not a metal fan. Which I'm not like that. Like, if you like Metallica, you're fine with me. But still, it's like, oh, when someone's like, oh, you like, grindcore, like, let's talk. So that's, so when I was like, I want to talk to Scott Kelly about wrestling, but it's like, why would Scott Kelly talk to me about wrestling? It was him, and then like I would watch PWG shows, and I would see Adam Jones from Tool in there. Like, I want to fucking talk to Adam Jones about wrestling, which I haven't yet. He's still he's my white whale. I've talked to Scott and a bunch of other people that I wanted. So then that's how I was just like, why don't I just create a podcast? Like, initially the idea was talking to metal musicians about wrestling, but when I started it, I started getting interest from wrestlers to do the show, and there's a lot of wrestlers that are metalheads. So I was like, oh, we can go the other way as well. I can go and talk to like Bubba Ray Dudley about his love of 80s metal, or whatever. And like, really, like, I had no, like, I'm not like, oh, this is going to make me $1 million. It's just like, this is just a fun thing to do, and maybe I can get into a few shows for free. And it's worked out beyond my wildest expectations, to the point where now it's kind of morphed into like just interviewing wrestlers, mostly just because like all the guys and bands that I wanted to interview I've done already, although there's still a few more. But then like it led to new opportunities where like I emailed, like I have contacts with WWE, contacts with AEW, and it's so crazy to just talk to these wrestlers and like hang out with them and just get to know them. And it's been very invigorating and really fun.
Yeah, it's so sick. And like, yeah, I just noticed like you had Moxley on and everything. It's so dope.
Right, yeah, and that was just like, I started talking to their publicist, and they were like, oh, well, who do you want to interview? And I was going to like, my first request was Darby Allin. I figured like, oh, let me be reasonable. They're not going to give me like, for example, Chris Jericho, even though I've had him on.
Yeah, Jericho.
But like, I've just said like, they wouldn't give me like the main event. But then I'm like, well, fuck it. Let me ask for John Moxley. If they say no, whatever. And then they were into it, and he was a great conversation. And like, all these wrestling dudes are really cool. And like, the highlight for me was I went to the first New Japan G1 show in Dallas last year. Literally, actually 1 year ago today. It came up in my time hop. And they were doing a press conference the day before, and I was in town. And I know a few like wrestling bloggers now, just from whatever. And I emailed. I was like, oh, hey, do you know anyone at New Japan? And they got me a last minute contact. And like the morning of, they were like, yeah, come. You could. We'll give you press credentials. And that was like just going. Like, I have a New Japan press pass. That was worth doing this, like Yeah,
Oh,
this
I
is
kind of see it keeps fading out with the background.
there. It is.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. So I was very excited about that, and that was worth it. That was
Yeah,
worth
even like
doing the
the
podcast.
voice talking about this kind of compared to the metal stuff, it seems like this kind of invigorated your excitement for doing media. It's something fresh, like a new world you're kind of like stepping in.
Yeah. Well, like I love metal still. Like I don't. But it's kind of become a job. Like it's my job, and I don't mean that necessarily in a bad way, but it's just like it's what I'm doing all day. So I need something to distract me, like not that's not metal, and wrestling is that. And wrestling has been a passion of mine forever, as since like since my earliest memories, even before I got into music. So it's been really fun to kind of bring these two passions together and like because honestly like last year or 2 years ago I went to more wrestling shows than metal shows just because I was
Yeah,
like I get it. I've been to like every like I get metal like it's
probably
just
seen
the
every band like 8 times by now.
yeah and like just the idea of going to a show like it started becoming such a hassle like oh it's so loud everyone's bumping into me everyone's drunk like all these things that you don't really notice because you're like I love going to metal shows so it's like if I'm feeling this way I should just take a break. And like instead I would go to wrestling shows and it'd be really fun and it was just like a whole different thing and it was fun to go and do something and just be a fan and not have to work or worry about like writing a recap or whatever. Not that I really have to do that going to metal shows, but still it's just like you got a network and all that stuff and like this is just much more low stakes, which I appreciate.
For sure, and I can imagine too your experience of like years and years and years of doing metal injection and then kind of jumping over to that wrestling world. Like you've had like so much like experience of knowing how to deal with different publicists and other layers that people don't even see when they see the final project of these media stuff. So of course you're getting guys like Moxley and Jericho and stuff like in the early stages of this because you kind of know how to like kind of I don't know like deal with the proper way of like media here.
Yeah, and I have the benefit of metal injection with the wrestling, like because wrestling companies constantly want mainstream attention or like attention in niches that aren't their own. So I have this really popular metal website, and I just have to show them the statistics. Like here's where it'll run, here's the traffic, here's our Facebook fans, whatever, and this is promotion for your outlet. So thankfully it's been a pretty easy pitch. I've sometimes been surprised at how easy it's been to get certain people. Like I got lucky enough, like I was able to have like a 20-minute phone conversation with CM Punk when he was doing his UFC fight, just because they were just looking for press opportunities outside of combat sports. So so like that really works into my benefit that I'm like not a wrestling like it's a wrestling podcast, but it's like a wrestlers talking about music podcast is kind of how I pitch it. So having an angle is very helpful. With like if we want to even just talk about pitching, like you have to realize like to the person you're pitching, yeah, they're doing you a favor, but there has to be something in it for them. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. Like why would anybody like it's like a friend could do a favor for you, but this is business. So you have to present it to them like why is it in your best interest to come on my show, and this is really like anything, like not necessarily podcasting, any sort of venture where you want someone to help you. And actually, like as an aside, if you've never read it, I highly recommend reading like at least the first 2 chapters of How to Win Friends and Influence People, because it'll absolutely help with this sort of thing of like, pitching and like how to get people on your show and stuff.
Cool. Yeah, I'll definitely check that out too. Yeah, that's cool.
It's like it's like a book from the 50s, but like everything that it says. I mean, really, like the crux of the thesis is in the first 2 chapters, and the rest of the book is just examples showing how the methodology works. So you just really have to read the first 2 chapters.
And I find like a common question I get to is like, oh, how do you get the guests? How did you get this guy? How do you get that guy? And it's kind of cool that you talked about like just that layer to media in a way, because lots of people from the outside looking in, they don't know how it works. They think you just like maybe call Chris Jericho and beg him or whatever, but there's layers of like little middlemen here and there, and like you said, you have to
Yeah.
have something that benefits them as well, and filters are there to make sure it's worth the time.
Yeah, to that end, like a lot of the interviews I got were because the person is promoting something specific. So it's a lot of it is timing. Like with Chris Jericho, he was promoting a new Fozzy record, I think, and so I kind of got him like through his music publicist. That's how I made that work out. But and I'm trying to think of, like with CM Punk, it was just because he was doing a UFC press day, and they were looking for outlets to do that weren't just combat sports. But sometimes I have just cold tweeted somebody like, "Hey, I have this podcast on this website. Would you want to talk for half an hour?" And it totally worked out. Kenny Omega retweet. I think he follows Metal Injection,
Cool.
or like he retweeted something from Metal Injection, and I was just like, holy shit! Like, and this was like peak Kenny Omega, like right when he was about to win like when he was feuding with Okada.
It's a
And I
god
was,
mode Kenny Omega.
yeah, yes, exactly. And
Yeah,
like,
for people who don't know wrestling, just Kenny Omega was like Jesus of pro wrestling for a few years. Yeah,
and he's a metalhead, so I was like, hey, I saw you retweeted us. Awesome to see that, and maybe we could do a quick conversation sometime, just talking about what bands you like. And he was like, yeah, I'd love to do it. And we were DMing, and it was like, it took maybe 6 months of like pestering him. And by pestering him, I mean I would just send him a message every few weeks, like, hey, don't mean to bother you. Like, again, he doesn't owe me anything. He doesn't, even though he said he would do the show. He's a busy guy, and he's in Japan, so it's like you got to be very careful with your wording so you don't come off needy, because if somebody senses that, they're not going to want to work with you. And so I would just be very nice, just like, hey, if you happen to have free time this week, just let me know what time works for you. I'll make it. And like, he gave me, no exaggeration, 3 hours notice. Like, hey, I'm free this time, and I just dropped everything because I was like, I need to do this, and I was like so sweaty doing the interview. I'm like, oh my god, I'm talking to like my favorite wrestler right now. But he was the nicest guy. So whatever method works to getting the interview, but it still has to be worth it for the other person.
yeah. I find I've been following or falling into interviews like a little organically now too, because I don't know. I just want to say this too, because like I know a lot of like content creators that check out my show as well. That when you're given like this opportunity, like I have some times where I'm given a guest where they're a lot bigger than my platform, but I feel like it's my duty, like when you get those moments, to just knock the interview out of the fucking park. Like, get prepared, just fucking attack it. And then I noticed from doing that, it's just leading to more and more, because the public, they come back to the publicist and they're like, oh, how was that? And it's like, oh, that was phenomenal or whatever. And I even had like, I forgot about this, but I had a moment where I might even cut this part of the interview, but I got a connection with Kenny Omega recently, but it was in the weirdest, untraditional way. I was interviewing this director. There's a film festival in Toronto every year, and this one PR company's like, "Oh, can you talk to this guy?" And it was very last minute, so I just look at his IMDb, see his list. I'm like, "Yeah, I'll talk to him," and then I watched his movie like literally like an hour before the fucking interview. I get in there and I'm talking, and then all of a sudden the battery starts going out in my Zoom recorder, and I'm like, oh shit, I need to find a plug. Can we pause the interview? So I press pause, and then from that, he just starts making small talk. He's like, oh, what kind of people do you have on your show? So then sometimes like comedians, musicians, and pro wrestlers. He's like, pro wrestlers, eh? He's like, you into wrestling? And I'm like, yeah. And so this conversation would never happen unless my battery was about to die. And I'm getting goosebumps telling him. And he's like, have you heard of Kenny Omega? And I'm like, yeah, like of course. I'm like, you're into Japanese wrestling, because this was still around like the whole like it was pre AEW time and stuff. And he's like, yeah, have you heard of the documentary they did on TSN?
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I didn't get to watch it. I don't have cable. He's like, well, I directed it. And then he just starts going off. He's like, yo, if you want to talk to Kenny, it's like, maybe next time he's in Toronto, me and him can do your show together. And I'm just like, like you don't even know what you're saying. And apparently AEW was kind of planning to come to Toronto, but then since the world like kind of shifted and stuff, so that's going to be put on the back burner. But it was such like a cosmic like universe moment of my batteries like getting cut off, or and then that conversation should have never happened, and that wasn't like listed on his credentials online. Because I think I clicked on something where it only showed his movies. It didn't show all the TV shows he did, and it's just
That doc was pretty good too. I don't know if you've seen
it
it.
was amazing. He followed him around for like a good year. Yeah, it was sick. Do you ever have any like cosmic moments of shit just coming together, just randomly? And,
Yeah, like there's been so many connections I've made that have been kind of just like that, like how you mentioned, just hanging out backstage and like smoking a joint with somebody and then learning that they're like some high ranking like Rolling Stone editor or something like that, and then just like, oh hey, maybe we should work together, you know, like, and then something comes out of that. Yeah, that's the other way, is just like being around like people are it's a very small, like metal specifically, but I feel like any entertainment industry, it's a very small industry. It's a very small circle of people. And another piece of advice that took me a while to learn is you need to be nice to everybody, because while like this publicist, like this no name publicist who reps no bands, like is of no use to you right now, you know, 2 weeks later they could just end up getting a job at the largest metal record label and now be representing all of these bands that you're dying to talk to, and because you were so rude and you blew them off 2 weeks before, they're never going to work with you. Meanwhile, if you're like really nice to everybody, which is mostly what I try to do, unless someone pisses me off, but if you're really nice to everybody, people, you know, like in any career, you know, people work their way up the ladder, and then like people that are interns or assistants eventually get the job and become the one in charge, and they know who their real friends are, because they're the ones that worked with them back when they were nobody. And so like I found that just being around metal for 16 years, there's turnover, and just like people, like the exact thing I'm saying, like people that were interns when I first started, that would like that the publicist would just, you know, send them to me because we were such a small website, are now the people running the whole department, and I'm still directly interacting with them because they realize the value of metal injection because of how long we've worked together. And there's been so many instances of people, like there's been people where I might not necessarily have been mean to them, but I'm just like, oh, who the fuck is this asshole? But then like 2 months later, it's like, oh, I need to be this asshole's best friend because I want to get these interviews, you know? And I mean, like, that sounds a little like shit. Like, I'm not just friends with people just based on, like, on what they can do for me. But I'm just saying, like, if you're working in an industry, you can't be shitty to people, because it's a very small industry. Word gets around, and if somebody doesn't want to work with you, they're going to tell their friends not to work with you either, and you don't want that.
and I'm sure it maybe like back in the early days too, you inspired some people, or just kind of like just cross paths with certain people, like you weren't even thinking. Maybe you just like share a blunt with them in a green room, and then later on, like you mentioned, they're up the ladder and like, oh, this guy's kind of cool, and like let's hook them up today, you know?
Yeah, and like the other thing with metal is like everyone is dressed shitty. So like, you know, this guy who looks like a homeless person could be like the head of A&R at Roadrunner or whatever, that you just don't know who this person is, but they're like a really powerful high-end Sony executive or whatever. And I actually had like, now that we're like into it, I had a pretty wild moment last year when I met Dave Grohl. And the way I met him was, there's a annual tribute to Dimebag Darrell called Dime Bash. It's just like everybody comes and does cover songs, you know. And Grohl started his barbecue company recently, So he was cooking barbecue for the show, which was for like the backstage VIPs, like the artists. And so like anyone who's anyone in metal is at this party. It's in LA. Anyone who's anyone's at this party, and like it's the first time I've ever seen like metal artists kind of like get starstruck. Like everyone in the room was just like their eyes were like going and like, what's Dave doing? What's Dave doing? What's and like there was like different variants of like how much people were fanboying out. Like some people were just like, I don't give a fuck, I'm going right up to him and I'm taking a photo. And then others were like looking at the, like they were at the zoo, like just staring at him. And I even caught myself doing that, and I'm like, Rob, what are you doing? Like, get out of here! Like, someone could see you. This is embarrassing. But I just couldn't help it because he is just like a real celebrity, you know.
You probably
Like,
just felt like an energy off him too. It's just like, oh my god.
yeah. Well, so the craziest thing that happens is like, I haven't said anything to him, and I'm like working up what I'm gonna say. Like I can't. I don't want to make an ass of myself. And then someone comes to grab him to go on stage to do a song, and he passes by me. And I swear, like this is like a movie. He passes by me. He turns around, makes the most intense eye contact with me, and already I'm like, what the fuck is going on? You know? And he's like, are you from Virginia? And I was so bummed out. I'm like, oh, no, but I wish I was.
So
He's
you
like,
thought you were somebody else. That's still
yeah, well, then he's like, do you know Guar? And I'm like, of course I know Guar. He's like, did you do a video with Guar? And I'm like, oh yeah, I worked on their DVD a few years ago. And he's like, dude, I love that video. You're so funny. And I'm like, dude, I love you. Or I think he said something like, dude, I love you. And I'm like, dude, I love you. Like, I gave it back to him. And I'm like, what the fuck is going, like, Dave Grohl is fanboying out about me? Like, what?
Yeah,
like,
of course.
and like my friends came up to me because they heard like yelling. And, like, so at this point, he's like, dude, I got to go play a song. Don't go anywhere. I'm like, I'm not moving. I'm not
here.
moving. I'm standing right here. And my friends come up and like, what the fuck was that about? And I was just like, I think Dave Grohl is a fan of mine, which is like, what is happening? And like, and so the show went until like 1, and again, like he's feeding everyone, whatever. I'm giving like, I want to talk to him, and like, so we talk a little. He says he's watched like these Guar videos we did with them like 10 years ago. He's watched them a million times. He's quoting verbatim the entire video. Like, I can't, like, what is going? Like, I can't express to you how, like, what level of emotion I was feeling of like there was so much happening. And like, also Dave Grohl as an artist meant so much to me that like there's so much I want to say that like I don't know how to say it without sounding like a total, you know, doofus.
Yeah. Kind of.
So yeah. So like I'm just hanging out, and then like he's just so busy. He's like, dude, just hang out. Like as soon as this is done, we're gonna chill. And like the show ended at 1. We were there until like 3:30, and finally we got to talk to him and like hang out, and we took some photos, and he was so nice, so unbelievably cool, and like he's just like stopped it. He's telling everyone like, this guy is so funny. He did it. That I'm like, what? Like he's telling Chuck Billy from Testament about like this fucking Guar video, and he's like, oh, that's cool.
That's amazing.
That's cool. And like Chuck Billy wants to meet Dave Grohl too, so he's like, cool, yeah, great, you know, whatever.
So then you become friends with him, and it's just like, oh, that's so.
Yeah, well, like we already know Chuck, not to like blow it out. Like Chuck Billy is another like huge star, but like you really see the tears of it, you know. So, and like that was it. I didn't sleep that whole night. You know, I got home at like, I got to the hotel at like 4 a.m. I had to be up at like 8. I was just up the whole night. I was
like, oh, I can't believe that.
Holy shit, yeah.
But in his defense, those Guar videos were fucking hilarious, man. Those were.
They were, and it really was like, it was like one of the things like, man, Dave Brockie, I have to thank him again. Look at how many gifts he has brought to me, like beyond the comedy. It was just like, just being in a video with him allowed me that moment with Dave Grohl, which I'm like, I'll cherish forever.
Yeah, no, that's such a beautiful story too. And rest in peace, Dave Brockie. That's
Absolutely.
But God, I feel like I can talk to you for like 9 hours. But I don't want to take too much of your time. Maybe down the road we'll do like a second one.
Sure.
I didn't even really jump into the wrestling shit yet, and I know that's one thing too. Like, what's really cool about everything is I had a moment with you when I seen some of your tweets, like maybe 5 years ago, about like man wrestling. I'm like, oh my god, somebody else is into this shit. It's like none of my friends are into like that niche, like fucking wicked Japanese stuff.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I felt the same way when I learned that you liked it, because it was like the only other person that watches New Japan that I know is Darren,
Yeah.
and he's not as into it as I. Like, he doesn't follow it as closely as I do. So like, you were the first other person that I knew that was like, oh my god, we could like flip out about like like when you showed me that photo of you and Naito, I was like, oh my god,
Oh yeah,
that's
like
amazing.
I like that with my profile picture. I'm like, nobody knows how special that is to me, and it's
Yeah.
great too. It's just like kind of like my career in Toronto doing videography. I've been in rooms with like fucking Drake and like all these fucking people, not even like phased. I see Naito, I'm just like, like deer in the headlights, and he noticed it. He's just like, he kind of waved, and we had this like this awkward exchange, but he was super nice. And what's funny about that situation too is they were setting up a meet and greet that you were supposed to pay for, but I didn't know. I kind of got in the venue a little early, and I just like, oh, Naito's beside me, and I just started like having like this conversation with him, and it was obviously like a big like language barrier, but it was so cool. I asked him for a picture, and he's just like, 1 second, and then walked away, and I'm like, oh, I just got blown off by Naito. He comes back, he has the IWGP title, puts it on my shoulder. I give my phone to my cousin who was with me, and he's just like, he did the eye thing. I'm like,
So cool.
smart.
So cool that he was like, no, we can't take this photo until I get the belt.
Yeah,
I love that.
Even I think the whole show, I kept missing moments. I kept opening my phone. I'm like, oh my god, this photo.
I absolutely understand. Like, that's how I felt when I went to that press conference. I was just like, oh my god, I'm so close to these people. And yeah, like with New Japan, I feel like it's weird. Like, it's such a special thing that if you don't follow it, you don't really kind of get it. And it was like, I don't have that many friends who are into New Japan or like into it, you know, like we are. And so talking about that G1 show and like going to a New Japan show, it's so wild because it feels like, oh my god, these are my people. Like, everyone understands all the references that I would make here. And like, some of them are even more hardcore than I'm not even like that hardcore comparatively. Like, people had like intricate like cosplay outfits and everything, you know, like, so it was like, it was so cool. And New Japan fans are my favorite. They're like the most polite, legit fans.
Yeah, true. Like, they really respect the art form, because it's beyond like just like crazy like soap opera. Like, first thing, we don't even speak the language, and even though they got a lot of North American guys there too, but it's more about like just the in-ring action.
Yeah, it's treated more like a sport, I feel.
And yeah, unfortunately, it's not happening in New York this year. Yeah, one thing I waited to like do this for so long. I mentioned to you was that I always wanted to do it in person. I was going to go check it out. And I also check out Madison Square Garden for the first time.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's my favorite.
And hitting
venue.
you up while I was in New York to do this. But yeah,
Well, maybe if they do end up doing it next year, if the world isn't over, that's when we could set up a follow-up podcast in person then.
yeah, I love that, man. And I got Madison Square Garden in your background right now. This is, I guess, the next best.
Oh, there you go. That's true.
But yeah, again, Rob, thank you so much for your time. Before we go, like, let's plug all the shit. You got the podcast, double podcast, live cast.
Sure, yeah, I'll do. Well, before plugging, I want to thank you for having me on, and I want to just say, like, I'm so honored and happy that like our podcast inspired you to create this really cool thing. Like, I've been following this podcast and like your social media, and it's so cool to see like the level of guests you were getting. Like, you're talking about all the wrestlers I got. Like, you've talked to plenty of like you've talked to like Lashley and all these like big time wrestlers too. So it's cool to see that like you kind of were inspired by what we were doing and you applied it to yourself into how like into doing like you're not doing your version of metal injection. You're doing what you wanted to do just based on being inspired from us doing what we wanted to do. So like that's really cool to me.
Yeah, I think that's one big thing I took out, like, or like I learned from all you guys is it's like it's important, like if you're gonna go for something, to be you and do it in your own way, and just like that's what makes it unique. That's what makes it like something different and attractive, and that's like we mentioned at the beginning of this interview too. That's what got me into metal injection, and you guys kind of been in a way, even though I'm not like you mentioned, doing a metal injection like carbon copy, but you've been like kind of a blueprint of giving me a boost of confidence to just kind of be myself. And even early live cast times, I was doing like this random comedy shit, and you guys would play, and I get such like a huge like reaction, and like random people from like New York start following me on like all these social media. So it kind of like around that time in my life, I was like a bit like sheltered and shy, but I always had like these passions in me, and it's just kind of like you guys kind of helped me in a time kind of learn in certain ways how to present them. I think what I'm trying to say, but
yeah, like you saw that we're like, oh, we're just regular schmoes and we're just doing it. why can't you be a regular schmo and do it, right? Like that's hopefully that's what we.
Yeah, you guys are beyond regular schmoes. But
yeah, now we're like celebrities, but
yeah,
back then.
Rawls like a huge fan. Like what the fuck?
Yeah, I mean, like I don't. It really took a while to be less self-deprecating and like accept it. Like, no, this is a big deal. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I'm like to wrap it up, to wind it down. Like I was invited to a Tool listening party when their album was coming out. I guess that was last year. When was this? Yeah, last year. Holy shit!
Only a year ago.
Yeah. So like last July, I got a email from the publicist like, hey, we're not doing promos, but if you want to listen to the album beforehand, we're going to play it. Like, we're doing a listening session at a recording studio in New York. It's like, what? Yeah. And
waited so long for that album, too.
Yeah. So
get the call to be in that room and listen to it.
Yeah, like we were like the first people to hear the album outside of like their friends and engineers and whatever, which I was just like, I was looking around the room and like it's like Spin and Rolling Stone and like these like big time things, and I emailed the publicist like, oh, thank you so much for including me and treating me like a serious outlet. and she responded like, well, you are a serious outlet. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. Like she's a friend of mine, so she was kidding, but
like I don't know, the passion of how you started it too, and like just like it's unreal how it's grown too. And even,
right, yeah.
Like, I feel like I have to check myself too in that way too, where I am naturally like self-deprecating myself all the time. I think that's also why I love listening to the live cast. It's just like you guys are like all like a similar personality. There's such
like it's a balance. It's a balance with the self-deprecating, because if you're too self-deprecating, you might like kind of like unintentionally hurt your brand. Like, oh, this isn't a serious thing. So you do still have to like put yourself over and like present like the like present your best foot, like as opposed to like, oh, it's this little website I do, like
it's kind of like humanizes yourself if you take a little tiny jab here and there, but it's important too not to do it all the time.
Yeah.
Like, without even listening, like, oh yeah, this guy doesn't believe in it, why shouldn't I?
Exactly.
Yeah. But
cool. Yeah, so my plugs. So yes, my website, metalinjection.net, not .com, .net. And then I have a podcast, Metal Injection Livecast. It's every Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Metalinjection.net/livecast is the URL for that. And then if you're a wrestling fan, check out my Wrestling Meets Metal podcast, metalinjection.net/squared circle pit. And then I'm Rob Injection on all socials if you want to follow me or just see my tweets about what a terrible country I live in right now? Do
Say
that.
what up. He's a friendly guy. And also some big shout out to Frank, Noah, 3D, Sid, any of the other people in the past from Metal Injection. I know there's been some like who's come and gone too, but yeah, like I mentioned this many times, it's really inspired me to kind of push this forward. I appreciate it, and it's special to me to have you on this show. Finally, even like at the beginning inception, I always had you in my mind, but finally just kind of stopped.
Yeah, I'm genuinely honored. Like, I'm flattered that you would have me on here.
To the Creative Imbalance podcast can burn in hell.